Okay, so we're taking a look at our newest design release called Aglow. And so I thought I would do a short video just to walk through some of the options, some of the little tricks and techniques to get the best results out of this design. So let's just run down through the layer stack here, and we'll just stop as we come to some elements here. So the first thing, the text in here, it is just editable text, so we could double click on this and just type our new text. Now, when it comes to the large title text, there is a slight difference in this one, and it's just the fact that this is set up as a smart object. And this is set up as a smart object so we can apply some more complex effects to this text, such as the shape, some of the outer glows and bevels and things like that, to make it a little more complex. But to edit this text, what we need to do is edit the smart object. And so to do that, we can see that this is a smart object because it has the little icon on the layer thumbnail here. So we just want to double click on this thumbnail, and it's going to open up a new document window, and now we just have normal text here. So we can see we can turn this off and on, or we can just double click on the icon to edit the text. So we could put in new text here. We'll put in Wildcats. We're going to click the check mark to apply this, and then all we need to do is close this document window. When it asks us if we want to save, say yes, and it's going to update this smart object with the new text with all of those pre-formatted layer styles and things that we have set on there. So that's the beauty of doing this as a smart object. So that's the little trick to doing that text. Pretty simple. So we'll just turn these off for just a second. So we also have some different elements in here, some foreground smoke elements to do some blendings and some darkening layers. So that's just going to help make your compositing a little more simple with some drop-in stuff. So there's several of these atmospheric layers, some different layers to add some more glow and things like that in your foreground and background. And of course all of these have hue saturation layers attached to them. So if you need to make a change to like the color of, say, this atmosphere, you could turn this hue saturation layer on, go to the properties window, and you could make changes to this color. You could make changes to saturation, the lightness, all of those things to kind of get the color dialed into what you need. And of course, once you do this to all of your settings, you're going to really build up a really strong color cast that's going to go well with your jerseys or your school logos or anything like that. So we also have down here currently 17 different kind of sport graphics. And of course these can just be turned off and on. They can be transformed, flipped, rotated, moved, however to fit your needs. And so if we expand and take a look in here, there's a few layers inside of each of these. And these are going to do some customizations to these as well. So we have like some additional glow. Again, that's to make this feel like it's more illuminated. You could change the color of that with the same hue saturation adjustment layers. We have these border glows, and these are the illumination for kind of these inner borders of the graphic here. Now these colors can be changed with hue saturation as well. The only difference with these are kind of like our title text. These are smart objects, and so the hue saturation is tied to a smart filter. So by clicking on it, we're not going to see the properties window until we double click hue saturation, and now it's going to give us the option to change the color of those glows as well. So again, smart object, instead of clicking on the layer thumbnail like we did the text, the difference here is we're going to click on hue saturation because that's what we want to adjust. So that's kind of a little trick to that. And then we can change like this little back color here of this texture behind the sports element. This is just doing some darkening to the edges of the ball. So there's little things in here if you wanted to go through and tweak that you could. And that's just kind of like a little glow effect to make the object itself feel like it's glowing. So again, feel free to play around with those, create your own custom looks and things like that. So let's look at putting a subject in. So up here we have our layer marked. So it's in red here, place subject in this group. So I've already got a subject dropped in. We'll just turn this on. So we've got this soccer kid in here, and we see we just got a subject layer and a ground shadow layer just to make him feel like, he's grounded to this floor. So I wanted to cover a couple techniques for kind of amplifying the glowing effect. So, if we think of this background element like a light source, then we can amplify that effect on our subject to help really bring this together in a much cooler way. So let's talk about that for a second. So let's go, so he's soccer, so let's turn tennis off, let's turn soccer on. Let's go back up to our subject here. And so what I want to start out with is I'm going to double click just kind of out here in the subject layer to get into our layer styles panel. And in the layer styles panel, what I want to look at is this style called Inner Glow. So we're going to turn that on. And so if I turn it on and off, you can kind of see right away it's already doing some cool things. Now my color is already set to blue. So I just, you could sample a blue out here, pick a random blue, or whatever color you're working with. And I want to make sure that my blend mode right now is on color dodge. So screen and color dodge are really the two blending modes that I like to work with inside of this effect. Color dodge is really good at mimicking realistic lighting effects. So I'm going to leave it on color dodge. I'm going to leave it on blue because that's the environment that we're in right now. And the other sliders that I want to look at, one is the size. So that's going to be how wide that glow goes from the outside in, because this is an inner glow from the outside in. That's how wide it's going to be. And the other slider I want to look at is the range. And so the range is how hard the transition is between that fade. So if we move the range down, it gets to be a very hard edge. If we move it up, it becomes a very soft edge. So I usually like to have the range, pretty high, 100%, maybe 90% or more. And so again, turn that off or on. It's looking pretty good. So I want to click OK, and we're going to apply this. So now we see we have our layer effect. Now the problem is this layer effect is happening in places that we might not want it. So kind of like the bottom of the legs, or maybe hit the back, or there could be places that it's showing up that you don't want this, where light really wouldn't be happening. So what we want to do is right click on this inner glow, and we're going to say create a layer out of this. So now once it's up on its own layer, we can add a layer mask to this and choose where we paint it in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to alter option, hold that in, I'm going to click the little mask icon, and now it's going to hide all of that effect with a mask so we can't see it. So now if I take a white brush, right over here to our brush, flows at 58, I'll leave it there for now. I can choose where we paint this effect in. So we know, if this were a light source, it would be striking all of these areas here. Now we're not going to see a whole lot of effect on that black right now. That's fine. Maybe the foot right here. So you can kind of pick where we paint this effect in. Now, because it's on its own layer, we can easily dive back into our layer style on our subject. So double click here, and we could turn on another inner glow, and we could start to build up the density of this lighting. So let's click OK. Same thing. I'm going to right click here, create a layer, and then I'm going to hide it with a mask. So alter option, click the mask, and then choose where I want to paint that brightness in some more. So anywhere I want to exaggerate that lighting, I can do that now. And you can see it'll start to get a little brighter as we stack that up. So you could do that as many times as you wanted to build that lighting effect up. So one of the other options we can do, let's jump into our layer style for our subject again. I'm going to do another inner glow, but this time I'm going to turn on the screen blending mode. And now we can see with screen, we get much more effect on these dark areas. So look at the hair, the shirt, the pants, the sock, things like that. So let's click OK here. I'm going to right click, create a layer, same process. I'm going to alter option, click on the mask to hide it. And so now I could come through with a brush, and I could just choose these dark areas where maybe I want it to feel like that light's really kind of blasting in there. Maybe not so much the hair. I think there's enough going on in the hair, but I really wanted to get, some of that sock, maybe a little of the shoe there, some of those dark areas. And that's looking pretty good. So if we turn these off, turn them back on, we can really see that it's kind of giving this impression that there's this back light source striking the subject back here. So that looks good. So the other thing that we can do to kind of push the realism of the lighting here is we can kind of fake the coloring of the highlights on the subject, and it's pretty simple to do as well. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a blank layer. So new layer here. I'm going to Alt or Option click between these two layers, so I'm going to clip it to the subject just like our effects layers have been clipped here, so it's only affecting our subject. And what I'm going to do is just jump in here. Let's zoom in. I'm going to grab the brush. I'm just going to sample like a blue from back here, say this kind of mid-tone blue. And so anywhere where I might want to add color to a highlight, so let's say like the back of the arm here, I'm just going to paint some of that in. Maybe back of the hair here. I think that's kind of like the white light for now there. We could even do the face if we wanted to, so the facial highlights like this here. And so what we want to do now is switch this blending mode over to color. So that's just going to colorize, so we still see through, it's transparent, it's just adding that color. Now to refine this, what we're going to do is a little bit of an advanced technique. We're going to go into our layer style, just like we did on the subject, but on this layer. So we're double click here, layer style is going to come up. This time we're going to look at this little middle bottom area called blend if. Specifically this bottom line here called the underlying layer. So what this is going to allow us to do is change how this layer interacts with the layers below it. And specifically, if we think of this kind of gradient here, this black to white, is like a histogram. So everything on the left is your shadows, everything on the right is your highlights. We see the RGB values for that here as well. So 0 is black, 255 is pure white. Now what this is telling us is on this current layer, wherever the values of the layers below it, because we're looking at the underlying layers, the value of the layers below it are between a lightness of 0 black, 255 white, we want this layer to show up. So right now that's everything. Everything falls between 0 and 255, so we can see everywhere we painted it showing up. But what we can do is we can refine this. We really just want this to show up more in the highlights. So we want to take it off of some of the shadow areas. So we do that by pulling the shadow slider up, and we can see how it's starting to kind of peel away from the shadows and just affect the highlights. Because now we're saying, okay, I only want this layer to show up where the layers below it are between a brightness value of 131 and 255. So these darker areas, it doesn't show up, it only shows up within this brighter range. Now right now it looks a little choppy and pixelated. To fix that, we're going to hold the Alt or Option key, and we're going to click this little slider and split it into two small sliders. And now what we see is this little, like 98/131. What this is telling Photoshop is, what I want you to do is not show up on anything below this small slider. Between these two, I want to do a gradient transition. So we lose that pixelation and we start to get a smooth gradient. So then we can tweak both of these little sliders like this, and we can see how we're just starting to colorize kind of those highlights. So if we get something like this, we can click OK. Now we've added some color there, and if it's too bright, all we got to do is just back up the opacity, and that's just going to kind of fake that idea that there's colored light coming in striking the subject. And you can make that as transparent as you want, just to cool those highlights down again, so it feels like he's in this cooler lighting environment. So that's a few kind of tricks there to how to really amplify the lighting on your subject to make them feel like they're really being illuminated by this background light source. So everything else should be fairly straightforward on this. If you've used any of my other designs, you're going to be pretty familiar with how I set everything up and lay it out. But I hope you get a lot of use out of this. More importantly, I hope it makes you a ton of money, and look forward to getting the next release out soon.